Hey, Vans Aircraft Builders, thinking about straying from the plans? Think about it again. It may cause you a little extra work down the road.
Runaway 2. Yeah, you're funny.
We're doing it! We're doing it!
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. From time to time, I get asked a question from fellow builders, as well as see the same question on the social media platforms such as advancedairforce.net. The question usually goes something like, the plans call for me to do steps A, B, and C, and hold off on doing steps D and E, and that's it. So the builders usually ask, why can't I do steps D and E now? It seems like it'd be a lot easier. I have access to the parts, or it just looks like I should be doing it now versus waiting. I always tell the builders, Vans has been doing this for a long time. They have vetted the process, they know the steps, and usually down the road, you're gonna need access to those steps D and E in order to accomplish some steps down the road. If you accomplish those steps now, because it's easier for you, you're gonna cause yourself a little extra work down the road. You may end up being having to drill out rivets or come up with another solution in how to accomplish that last task. So I always say, if you're gonna do that, think ahead, look at the plans, try to find out where that steps D and E get accomplished down the road. It may be a ways down into the build, and that'll give you a better understanding of why Vans has said, don't do those steps now. Another thing is straying from the plans in doing things your own way. For an example, in my aircraft, I did the armrests different. That was because I liked some of the other builders and their ideas that they had. What that caused me was extra work, especially related to my throttle quadrant. If you go back and look at the other video, I talked about the interior of the cockpit, you'll see the throttle quadrant moved, and it moved aft and it moved inboard. Caused me to have to figure out new cable lengths, new brackets I had to manufacture on my own, stuff like that. I knew that going in, but on occasion, you do something like that and you don't think far enough ahead or understand the ramifications for the change that you're doing. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're little, sometimes they're not that big a thing. On my case, one of those items that I did was my brake lines going from the bottom of the fuselage down to the brakes on each main wheel. So guys, we're looking down here at my right main wheel on the RV8. And one of the things I veered from the plans was to use a stainless steel braided brake line that went from the top of the landing gear leg right up there. It's at the bottom of the fuselage, runs on the aft side of the landing gear, underneath that landing gear fairing, down to the brake system. What I had in here originally, and you'll see in this picture, is a 45-degree angle fitting, AN-4, in my stainless steel braided line that came down to it. In the plans, Vans would have you build that brake line all the way down from the top, all the way down in a solid aluminum tube that they send with you, creating a loop in the back here for stress relief. I veered from the plans, not thinking too far ahead. The issue with the setup that I originally had was that when you want to change the brakes, the brake pads are onto brackets on the inside of this brake caliper. The whole thing floats so that it creates equal pressure on the brake disc. You take these two bolts out, safety wire off, two bolts out. There's Nord washers in there as well, locking washers. These two bolts here are actually pins, and this whole thing slides in and out. In order to get the brake pads, you have to slide that out. The outboard brake pad will drop off, The inboard is on a bracket that's connected to these two pins, so you have to pull this whole unit out. Well, with the setup that I had, the stainless steel brake line went outboard of this bracket, which is for the wheel pants. So in order to slide this unit out, I would have to disconnect this fitting, which was connected to that 45, to get that whole brake caliper to slide out. The downside to that is all my brake fluid drains out. So anytime I wanted to change the brakes, which I've changed them each condition inspection, including this one, as well as my trip, at the end of my trip from Sun and Fun 2 years ago, when I had the issue with the throttle not being able to get below 1200 RPM, and I ate up into my brakes. So each time I wanted to change the brakes, I had to drain the brake fluid, change the brakes, change the brake pads, not a big issue because I have the tool and it's a pretty easy process, reinstall the brakes, and then I would have to do the bleeding of the brake fluid all over again. So there's an instance where I veered from the plans and I didn't think far enough ahead as to the ramifications that my changes were going to have. Not a big deal, but if you were out on a road trip and you needed to change the wheel or the brakes had an issue, now you're going to need brake fluid, ability to fill the brake reservoir in order to bleed the lines, a whole lot of mess. Now, what I did was add a male-to-male AN-4 fitting and a 10-inch piece of stainless steel braided, essentially creating the same loop that Vans would have had me do with the solid line. What that allows me to do now is, after taking these two bolts out and I slide this unit out, there's enough flex in this hose that I can get it out, change my brakes, take the wheel off, whatever you need to do, and then not disconnect my brake line, so my brake fluid reservoir all stays intact. Then I could reassemble everything. So there, guys, there's a perfect example of straying from the plans because you think it's better or something that you just like that could cause you a headache down the road. I knew about this on my last condition inspection and I wanted to get it changed and I just didn't. And that was one of my goals on this one, to change that out so that if I broke down or had a brake issue on the road where I could get brake pads replaced easy, I would not have to mess with the brake fluid. I could just get everything off with a 7/16 inch either socket or open end wrench, take the brake caliper off, change out the pads, put it back on, good to go. So that was one of the things that I did that I strayed from the plans that caused me a little bit of extra work, headache down the road, and it could have been really bad had I had a brake issue out on a flying trip. So for you builders out there, whether it's Vans or any other aircraft, that's the fun thing about the EAA. It's education and recreation. You get to do what you want with your aircraft, and just think about what the changes you're doing and the causes that they're going to have down the road. So again, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for subscribing. We're hoping to get out and start flying a lot more. It's been a really cold, nasty winter here in Chicago. Not tons of snow, but just cold, low overcast skies, and we're fair weather flyers. We like the warm weather. So we're looking forward to spring and getting out and flying. So you know the drill. Click the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to get notified of these videos, and thanks again to everybody who's subscribed and watching the videos. All right, we'll see you on the next one.